Okay, so we are starting here our class, and I'll explain in a moment why I am showing this video specifically. Was ist es schmutzig over here? Nope. Okay, so here we go. Let's come here, back here, and here we go. We changed the. I don't know if this is a good thing or not a good thing, but let's see what's going on. Okay. Hope you see me. I see you. Let's do this. We have to go a little further back. I don't know. I changed the. I think we've got to go back to the other way. But okay. For now, we'll have to leave it because you can't change it midway. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvarei. Let's move it a little further back because, again, as I say, midway you cannot change the from horizontal to. Can't change it. Okay, bear with me here. Sorry for all this mishigas. Okay. Okay, so today's class, as you saw, the topic is getting out of your box. So let's talk about that for a moment, or more than a moment. I don't know, we're having problems here today. I apologize. My apologies. My apologies. I hope it's good. I know it's a little strange, but okay. So I'm sorry. I'm going to try one more time, so please forgive me. Try one more time to make this a little bit better. I think it's a little bit better. Sorry. Okay, so let's get straight to learning. So we are the title of the class is Getting Out of Your Box. And we began with showing. Let me shut this down over here. The music in the background. We began with a video of the Rebbe. The reason why we began with a video of the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, is because we went ahead and we yesterday, Shabbat and it was the Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat is the day that the previous Rebbe passed away, the previous Rebbe of blessed memory, who single-handedly stood up to the communist government in Russia and made sure to have hundreds and hundreds of secret underground yeshivot and mikvahs and synagogues and so on, places of worship. And he passed away on Yud Shvat, and on the next year, that's in 1951, the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, took on the leadership of the Chabad movement. Now, I want to discuss the following. And this is an important point, or more than just a point. This is this past week, let's start with a Dvar Torah. We always like to mention something from the Parsha. This past week, we read about God commands Moses. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh, and you should warn him about the next plague, which is about to occur, which is the plague of the locusts. But first, he says to him, you should go to Paro and tell him that you should send the Jewish people out. And over there the term is Bo el Paro, come to Paro. And there are commentaries who talk about this. Why does God say to Moshe Rabbeinu, Bo el Paro, come to Paro? Why doesn't he say Lech el Paro, go to Paro? And the Zohar says the following. The Zohar says that at this point, God says to Moses to come to Pharaoh while he's in the throne, in the palace, to the most, whereas the other times it says you should go out to him while he's in the Nile, when he's outside, perhaps a little more vulnerable. Here he's coming to to the core of his power. And Pharaoh, as we know Kabbalistically, the Zohar talks about it in all the Kabbalistic books, that Pharaoh represents the core of evil. He says, Lo yadaite es Hashem, I do not know God. So Pharaoh is symbolic, not just of a human being that enslaved the Jewish people, but he's symbolic in all times of the core of opposition to holiness, the opposition to godliness. As a result, Pharaoh himself, Moshe himself, was afraid, says the Zohar. He was afraid to go to Pharaoh. And therefore God says, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh, because I will be with you, and I'm coming with you to Pharaoh and to the core and source of evil, so that you could subdue it, overcome it, and therefore you do not have to be afraid. That is what the Zohar says. It's a famous, known Zohar, and we're going to relate that parsha and connect it to what we celebrated yesterday, which is the leadership of the Rebbe as he ascended to leadership on Yud Shvat. And I want to talk about this. And I want to talk about it in the context of a, you know, I mentioned, Bo el Para, you should come to Pharaoh. Okay? So you should come to Pharaoh means you should come to the core of the opposition of holiness in its time. So in celebrating Yud Shvat, I want to, I had a bit of a cute incident, and I know I have some of my fellow physicians, fellow friends who are physicians that watch and listen to the class, and I'm honored that they do so. And I had a sort of cute little episode, and no disrespect intended, as I will explain, but it was just a cute episode. Last week, I was sitting and having sort of a lunch and learn Torah learning with two physicians who are both dear friends, and the topic that came up was about COVID. It's a very often discussed topic, and of course people have different opinions of what's not, and today's day and age, everybody has strong opinions, and I get messages and websites and links from different people saying that, Rabbi, this person and this little video says it all, and this is what you got to watch, and this is the correct approach, and everybody is very passionate about exactly their opinion. Maybe just under political passion comes COVID passion. So I was sitting and having lunch, and some argument broke out, a mild argument, or not an argument, maybe a difference of opinion of what is the correct answer regarding a certain COVID precaution. And here I'm sitting with two physicians, and one physician pulls out his phone and says, okay, let me look it up on Google. I think it was Google. And, for the answer. And I'm thinking to myself, I could do that too. I'm not a physician. So I'm mentioning this story for a reason, and before I explain why I'm mentioning this story, I want to first make it clear that this is not any disrespect intended for physicians. On the contrary, and I want to explain that, by the way. While initially, that was my first thought, I could look it up on Google too. I don't have to be a doctor with a degree that studied and interned for 7, 8, 10 years, whatever it is. But I do want to say like this. I know this personally from the rabbinic field, that, as a rabbi, I also sometimes look things up on the internet, even questions that I get. But being that you have, Baruch Hashem, and I'm not trying to defend the rabbinic position, I'm trying more here to be respectful to the doctors, which is very true. I'm just using my own experience to explain this point, is that when you have expertise in a given area and then you go on the internet, you could very quickly distinguish between a site that's fluff and just a very superficial opinion versus something that's real. And again, I know that in the rabbinic field, that I could right away go to different sites or different internet links and see whether this is a reliable source, not a reliable source. I could discern that very quickly. So I want to defend my good friends, the doctors over here. Okay, but why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because it's no secret. It's no secret that today we find ourselves in an age where there is tremendous access to information. Tremendous access to information. And as a result of that, there is, of course, benefits, and there is, there's pros and there's cons. There are pros and cons that affect society because of this tremendous access to information. Whether it is, we just come from, whether it's in the political arena, that you all of a sudden have these echo chambers that have been created where people have access to to millions who share their views and therefore become stuck. So that has its pluses and it has its negatives, that you become very stuck in your opinion and your position. And you basically have almost zero access to, or zero exposure to information that you disagree with. So that has its, again, pros and cons. As well as, talking about raising children. You have, especially a far cry from the way it was in the shtetl. You don't have the ability at all to control or safeguard. I shouldn't say you don't have the ability at all, but it's very difficult. It's far more challenging to properly safeguard your children to what exposure they have. Remember, I think it might even been a talk from the Rebbe where the Rebbe said that it used to be in the shtetl that the child would come, and where would they play? Where would they play their ball or whatever games? The only place where there was space for the kids to play was in the courtyard of the shul, the local shul in the village, in the shtetl, whatever it is. And what would they see as they were playing through the window? They would see Jews sitting and studying, Jews sitting and praying. That was their exposure for the most part. But that has very, very much changed, as we all know. And there is, again, exposure to a world where, and information, which has its benefits, because there's a lot of learning that's going on, but it also has its risks. And I'm saying this by way of introduction because in the Parsha of the week, where we just spoke about Bo El Paro, we also read about the greatest event in Jewish history, about the Exodus, about going out of Egypt, and the miracles associated with that. And in relating to our discussion, the going out of Egypt also represents, as the title of this class is, that going out of your box. Egypt represents, in Hebrew especially, Mitzrayim, and we talk about this a lot more when we come around to Passover, but Mitzrayim means limitation. Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, the Hebrew name for Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt. And what happens is that you are going out of Egypt on a personal level means going out of your box. Meaning going out of your own limitations, going out of your own habits and so on. So I want to elaborate on that. I want to elaborate on that and bring these two things together. Going out of Egypt, Boyel Pari, come to Paro, and that the Zohar says that God says, "Don't be afraid, I'm coming with you," and Yud Shvat, celebrating the Rebbe's leadership. For those who want to know what Chabad is, of course, as taken into a whole new level based on the leadership and guidance and teachings, inspiration of the Rebbe, there are various answers to that question. Some might say Chabad is a religious organization. Some might say Chabad is a humanitarian organization. Some might say various answers. But I don't want to get into that so much. But if there's one way that you could describe the Rebbe, one of the key ways that you could describe the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, is out of the box. And not only out of the box himself, but trying to push and inspire every single person to get out of their own box. And this could be both qualitatively and quantitatively, meaning that you could reach, and there are countless stories, and I'll mention one story that I know happened with my own stepfather. I'll explain that in a moment. You could talk about getting out of your box quantitatively, in the sense that, okay, I do what I could do, I cannot do any more, I reached my limit. And the Rebbe, both in his personal example that he set and in what he inspired others, is to always push the envelope to go more and further beyond what you thought was your capacity, going out of your own Egypt, your own limitations. I want to say just a personal story. It's a simple story, but I witnessed it. And I was there as a child. My stepdad, whose yahrzeit was actually just over a week ago, and he raised me, because some of you who've heard my classes know that my biological dad, Auschwitz survivor, died at a very, very young age. And I was, a very young child. And then basically since, I believe it was age 7, I just turned 7, until a couple of years ago, my stepdad raised me. My stepfather, who, although not in Auschwitz because he's Russian, so he has his own interesting history. Interesting is I'm not sure the best way to describe it, but Jews who went through that generation had to go through a lot of suffering and etc. And he was in Russia during war times. He himself sat in prison as a child for being caught studying Torah or having a Farbrengen, a Hasidic Farbrengen, a discussion for a different time. Eventually, they left Russia. They were in France for many years and then came to the United States. Now, because he was in France and he was very gifted, he learned the language, the French language, and he became the translator of many of Hasidic magazines called the Talks and Tales. He became them, which I remember him working on, and he became the translator of the Tanya, the seminal work of Chabad from the first Chabad Rebbe. He translated the Tanya into French, and I remember how dedicated he was on working on the Tanya. He was a perfectionist. He really did things right. He would have it checked and reviewed by others and so on, and he really put his heart and soul. And as I recall, I'm a child, so I hope my memory is correct, that he went by our holy Rebbe and mentor, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, went by the Rebbe on a Hanukkah, and he asked, the Rebbe gave him $1 that was, was for Hanukkah Geld, a symbolic dollar, and then the Rebbe asked him what's going on with the Tanya, whether it's done yet. And he answered the Rebbe, the gist of it was that, he's working hard on it, and he's getting, it's going to be done. And the Rebbe said to him, in an uplifting way, in a way that only the Rebbe can to one of his very special Hasidim disciples, he said, it's all fine, but though it's all fine and good, all the explanations are valid, but the people who have to learn in the Tanya, and will learn it once it's translated into the Latin, into French, don't have it yet. And to my father, that's all that the Rebbe had to say for him to push him and into a new level, to break even the boundaries that he felt he had. And this was just a short little vignette, and there's so many stories of highlighting or expressing that theme. So the Rebbe was out of the box and pushed us to be out of the box. That's quantitatively. Qualitatively, there are so many areas where the Rebbe was out of the box and too numerous to mention. But I want to mention one or two or three and the lesson that we could draw from that. One thing we asked about Chabad, one thing, and this relates to the Boyal Pare. So maybe I will mention this later because I want to come back to it. The Rebbe, I said that there's one theme that we see by the Rebbe which is out of the box, but I want to mention another theme. Another theme is that you can what's the word I'm looking for? You can successfully merge the highest, most lofty spiritual level of life, of revelation, of connection with and within the materialistic, normal day-to-day life. In other words, there is the way of thinking, perhaps in other religions, and even within the Jewish religion, that in order to be spiritual, you have to remove yourself of anything really materialistic, to the extent that in some they have shunned getting married. You shunned being involved or eating or fasting days and for days on end and so on. But that was not the Rebbe's understanding, interpretation of Torah and approach. In fact, almost to the contrary, other than maybe exceptional cases for given reasons, it's the other way around. It's going ahead and living the most normal life that you could live, of course, according to the guidelines and what's permissible according to Torah and the code of Jewish law and God's will, 7 Noahide laws, and at the same time infusing that, and you can be connected to the most lofty level. So, and that was an out-of-the-box approach because that also highlights, in a sense, the Chabad approach. And I want to take it a step further. The Rebbe was out of the box qualitatively in the sense that, and I know that let's go back to the 50s. It was unheard of not to be totally secluded within your own world. In order to be a Jew, in order to remain a spiritual person, in order to remain connected to your roots, you have to totally seclude yourself. You cannot interact. I had a personal story that I was doing miftzoim, I was doing the mitzvah campaigns on Manhattan on a street. And I was walking over and asking people, are you Jewish? And if yes, would you like to wrap the tefillin? Can I give you a Shabbos candles if it was a female to light the Shabbat candles? And I had a Hasidic Jew from a different crowd, not a Chabad group, came over to me and said, how are you not risking yourself by standing on the streets of Manhattan and exposing yourself to what you see on the streets of Manhattan, which are perhaps not as holy as what you see in the yeshiva? How could you do that? So the Rebbe went against the grain of the rest of the religious world. He was out of the box in a real sense of that our job is not only to remain connected to our roots, our job is to go out and make the world a better place. Our job is to bring the light of holiness, the light of Torah, the light of goodness, the light of godliness, not only to ourselves, but to those around us. And that was manifest in so many areas, whether it was during the 60s and 70s about the women liberation movement, where the Rebbe didn't shun it, but embraced it in the sense that it is from a Torah perspective. And this was also out of the box to the sort of the religious world. The Rebbe said, yeah, women's liberation in the sense that women have unique characteristics and contributions to making the world better that men don't have, and that has to be utilized, etc. There's many examples. So let me sort of bring this together into a sort of a final point and an important point. and a practical point in a sense. The paro of today's day and age, talk about boyal paro. Moshe was afraid to confront the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh of today's age is for sure much of the culture that we are surrounded with, that definitely not only is not in sync with Torah values, but is in opposition to Torah values. And they don't need to necessarily be enumerated, whether it's family values, whether it's societal values in general. There's no question that there are some views and approaches which are very, very much in opposition of Torah. And you could say that that's the Pharaoh of Ayatim. That's the core. And many of our own children and brethren and just fine human beings are so influenced by that and caught up by that, rather because that's what you see. You see it all the time, whether it's coming out of Hollywood. Today it's so unfortunate. It's sad. You watch some shows or TV shows which are in itself good shows, and they must bring in some of these values which are totally in opposition to, I would say, many in society, and definitely opposition to Torah and God's values. So that's the Pharaoh of our day. Definitely one of the examples. So when you're raising children, let's use that example. In today's day and age, or you're raising yourself, there's a fear to go out and conquer or bring goodness, because you have to confront a lot of Pharaoh, a lot of core unholiness has to be confronted. So this was the Rebbe's approach. The Rebbe's approach was, and this is fundamental, the Rebbe's approach was, while yes, there are certain protections that you must put up, but at the same time, ultimately, the power of holiness, the power of goodness is stronger than the power of evil, or of vanity, and so on. Meaning that in a way that is allowed by code of Jewish law, which sets its limitations, after that, you must and you can, Boel Para, you can come to Pharaoh with the objective of exodus, of redeeming both yourselves and those around you. You could do so because Hashem, God, is with you, because the power of good, ultimately, since God created the world to be good, the power of good is stronger. Why is this relevant? What's the relevance? So I'm going to talk first as just in terms as a rabbi, an educator, father, and so on with our children. So let's just take the internet, for example, and I mentioned before, it has so much positivity to it. And yes, you have to have filters, and yes, you have to do whatever you can, but ultimately, there's only so much you could do to protect in today's day and age. Where should you put more emphasis? The main emphasis, and this was a leading example we saw by the Rebbe, again, in celebrating Yud Shvat, he puts far more emphasis in strengthening, in enhancing one's light, by learning more, by studying more, by talking, by giving a positive experience, by making sure your children have a positive experience in the connection to their roots. Because if you do so, and you inspire them, and you instill within them a love, a connection, a drive to continue to study Torah, to learn, to connect, and so on, they will have the power to overcome. If your emphasis is only with trying to protect them from the negative, that is driven by fear, which is important, but that shouldn't be the main focus and the main emphasis. The main focus and emphasis is that we can conquer and bring light to the world around us, Boel Paro, We can conquer and raise our children to be healthy, productive, meaningful, purposeful human beings. In other words, fulfilling their purpose as in terms of bringing holiness and godliness and making the world a kinder, better place based on the foundations of our teachings, of the Torah. We could do so. And of course, the practical result of this is that if you're watching this class, think of 2-3 things that you could do with your child or with your student or with yourself that will enhance your positive connection, your love, will deepen your roots and appreciation, mind and heart, with Hashem, with holiness, with goodness, and that will enable you to overcome the paro, the Baal paro, that will enable you to go out of your box, out of your comfort zone, and make both yourself and the world around you and your family around you and so on better, more productive people. So that's the thought of today. I hope it was came across clearly. And thank you for watching. You should have a fantastic week, a blessed week, a productive week, and share these words of Torah with others, please. All the best. See you again next week.